The next fly I'm going to tie is one of the most effective spiders I've ever used in my life, particularly during high summer or early summer when there's lots of small black stuff about. And during black gnat time, it's absolute mustard. This fly is Stewart's black spider. Now, I wouldn't mind betting that there's very few anglers in the country, fly fishermen in the country, that can tie a Stewart's spider correctly. And the reason is that very few have taken the trouble to obtain this book, The Practical Angler by W.C. Stewart. This book's a little gem. And by the way, who can remember gut? And what was gut? Was it catgut? No, it wasn't catgut they used. It was this stuff, silkworm gut. And this particular material has to be soaked overnight, or at least 2 hours, before you can start fishing with it and before you can start tying knots. Otherwise it just breaks. And this was made by the package on this says Siggut, meaning silkworm gut, silk line of purest silk. But it wasn't silk from the spinnerets of the caterpillar. It was produced by actually taking the silk glands out of the caterpillar. And here's a card, and this is produced by the Pilot Gut Company of 170 The Strand, London, WC2. And they could get it quite fine. In fact, the finest on here is 6 thou, that's 00 grade. And it goes 6 thou all the way up to 50 thou at this end. So they could get it down to about what would be equivalent of about 3 pound, 2.5 or 3 pound breaking strain. And in this particular book, by the same company, The Story of Silkworm Gut, it shows you in here some lovely pictures of all these workers in the factories in Murcia in Spain, all producing this silkworm gut. And there's the old silkworm moth caterpillar. It says actual size of fully grown silkworm with glands exposed. So they've done a little cutaway to show where the glands are. And these glands were down both sides of the caterpillar, little tubes. And so when they stretched these glands out, the excretion from the glands, it must have been like stretching out soft, well-chewed chewing gum. They stretched it out, extruded it, and they finished up with bundles of this stuff, and they used to take it to market to sell. And then it eventually came to England, to places like the Pilot Gut Company, and there they finished it then by drawing it through dyes. They pulled it through dyes. And there's a picture of a die with various diameters, 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x. And there's a real small micrometer. And you could actually buy these plates yourself, and they're in here at a price at 12 and 6 per hole. So there's no date in here, but looking at the pictures inside, the photographs of the workers, it looks to me as though we're talking about the turn of the century or just before the First World War. And you can see them all working there with the suits on, and ladies in almost what looks like crinoline dresses. So that's what Stewart and all these others like Edmonds and Lee and Pritt, they all either tied on this stuff, silkworm gut, or on horsehair. Horsehair obviously was weaker than this stuff. And I can just remember when I was a boy, my dad, who was a keen match angler, soaking casts overnight in dishes of water, and I'd be about 4 or 5 years old, and my instructions were keep your bloody hands off this stuff. And then when you soaked your cast, you would wind it into a wallet like this that had a moist pad inside, and you'd wind it on so that it stayed moist through your fishing day. And in this old wallet that I've got here, there's actually a lot of flies tied onto silkworm gut. I've got some partridge and oranges, nice examples of P&Os, some little red sedges, some what look like alder flies. And the thing is that they could only extrude this silkworm gut so far, and you didn't finish up with 5 or 6 yards of it. You stretched it to, I think they could get about a yard, that was all, from one extrusion from the silkworm caterpillar. And so there's a nice group of flies here, all tied on silkworm gut. So I'm going to tie this Stewart's black spider as per his instructions, but of course I'm using this baby, a fly tying vise. All the rest will be as per Stewart. I'll also use hackle pliers. I'm not going to use my fingers, because if I use my fingers, Colin the camera is going to have a hell of a problem following me. I'm going to be in and out of shot, and it's going to be a nightmare for him. So we're going to do it nice and stable in the vise. So I'm going to tie this on a 14. I tie them on 14s and 16s. I don't go to 18s. Tie them on 14s and 16s. And make it a nice meaty black fly. And it works like a dream. It's a beautiful fly. Mash down the barb. Now, it's not black silk, it's brown silk we use. And it's waxed. But it doesn't say well waxed. Because I'm going to twirl the hackle and the thread together, I can't do it on the bobbin, so I've got to, when I've waxed this, I shall cut it off. So I will be partly tying by hand. So I've waxed my thread, and now I cut it off. So I'm winding by hand now. So I'm now virtually, apart from the holding the hook bit, I'm virtually a la Stewart. Starting in the centre of the shank, make the thread catch. And then trim off the waist. Now take the thread up to the end of the shank, and at that position make a small head. So I'm wrapping on the spot and making a little mock head. Now he would have held that between his fingers there while he picked his feather up. I'll just leave it like that. Then he says, hackled with a small black feather from a cock starling. The other mistake to make is to think that Stewart's spiders are tied with these little fine feathers around the starling's neck. Stewart doesn't say where on the bird. He just says a shiny black feather from a cock starling. You've got to search for a feather that will give you the correct barb length that you want. Again, thinking in terms of a spider, and he says the legs should be about as long as the hook. And he says also you tie it in by the butt end. So this is breaking or bucking the trend of the other of Yorkshire spiders, North Country spiders. So you tie the feather in. I don't think it says the number, I think it just says the word several wraps. And when it's securely tied in, trim off the waist. Now it says lay the silk along the inside of the feather, and then you twirl the two together. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grip them both together. He says hold them in your finger and thumb and twist the two together. I'm going to do it in my hackle pliers. So I've trapped both materials together, and now I wind them up, start twisting. And you'll find that the hackle and the thread twist up nicely. And then you wind down the shank now. And what you find is the hackle fibres stick out in lots of directions, and it makes this spider look very, very natural. And Stewart actually says that of all the things that it could represent, it would be a spider. So he's thinking that this imitates a land-bred spider. And I suppose that's where the term first came from. Now you have to separate the thread from the feather. Remember, this was twirled in his fingers. So what I do, I just get my thread to the side of the hackle pliers, slightly open the hackle pliers and slide the thread out. And if the feather comes loose, you can just grab hold of it. If the tip comes over, you can just grab hold of it and tie it down. That done, take your scissors and trim off the waste, where you then make a whip finish or several half hitches. And I reckon, like me, he would have trapped fibres down, and I reckon he didn't bother too much about it. Pull through, job's a good one. And that's Stewart's Black Spider. And that is a great little wet fly. This fly, when it's finished, you don't see anybody, or you shouldn't see anybody, you'll just see a whole mass of little shiny glossy starling fibres sticking out in all sorts of directions, and it just looks like a little black struggling insect in the water, and fish absolutely love it. They devour it. I've had loads and loads of fish on this fly. It's a brilliant pattern.